In the world of political thought, few names evoke as much controversy as Niccolò Machiavelli. His name is often synonymous with cunning, manipulation, and ruthless ambition. Yet beneath the surface of The Prince lies a more complex and sobering message. Machiavelli does not glorify evil, rather, he warns against the dangers of blind goodness in a corrupt world. He reveals how well-intentioned leaders, clinging to virtue without understanding power dynamics, often bring about their own downfall and the destruction of their states. The concept of goodness has long been championed as a universal virtue, an essential characteristic for any just leader. We admire rulers who are merciful, honest, and generous. However, Machiavelli invites us to question whether those virtues are sustainable or even safe. When surrounded by adversaries who are willing to deceive, betray, and exploit any weakness, to him, politics is not a realm of moral absolutes but a battlefield where survival often requires moral flexibility. This video explores Machiavelli's philosophy through a modern lens, uncovering how he challenges traditional ethics and proposes a provocative alternative. That the appearance of goodness can be more useful than actual goodness, and that vice, when properly applied, can serve the greater good. By examining historical and contemporary examples, we will better understand Machiavelli's warning that without a strategic understanding of power, virtue can lead to catastrophe. Machiavelli's world, chaos, betrayal, and realpolitik. To appreciate the depth of Machiavelli's arguments, one must first understand the political chaos of Renaissance Italy. At the time of his writing, Italy was not a unified country, but a fragmented patchwork of city-states, often at war and constantly vulnerable to foreign invasion. Florence, where Machiavelli served as a diplomat, was in perpetual political flux. Loyalty shifted with the wind, and leaders were frequently overthrown or assassinated. In such an environment, traditional ideals of leadership were not just impractical, they were dangerous. Machiavelli's primary concern was stability. He had witnessed firsthand the collapse of governments that were too idealistic to defend themselves against cunning rivals. When he wrote The Prince, he aimed to offer a clear-eyed manual for surviving and thriving in a world where enemies abound, and no one plays fair. His work is not a manifesto for tyranny, as some critics claim, but rather a realistic analysis of how power functions in an imperfect world. The harsh truths Machiavelli presents were not entirely new. However, what made his perspective revolutionary was his unapologetic focus on results over intentions. For Machiavelli, a ruler's primary duty is to preserve the state. If achieving that requires cruelty, deceit, or manipulation, so be it. Better a feared ruler who keeps the peace than a beloved one whose naivete leads to ruin. This is where the dark side of goodness emerges. When goodness is practiced without regard to consequences, it can be fatal. The trap of virtue, when good intentions fail. In chapter 15 of The Prince, Machiavelli delivers one of his most quoted and controversial lines. A man who wishes to act entirely virtuously soon comes to ruin among so many who are not virtuous. This observation is not merely cynical, it is deeply practical. Machiavelli is not arguing that virtue is bad, but that in a world filled with deceitful actors, virtue alone is not enough to survive. The good prince must know when to abandon moral ideals in order to preserve the state. Take, for example, the concept of generosity. In theory, a generous ruler wins the love of his people. But Machiavelli argues that unchecked generosity leads to excessive taxation or depleted state finances. Eventually, the same citizens who once admired the prince's kindness may rebel against him when resources run dry. Thus, virtue, when not guided by foresight, can become a liability. The ruler must balance image with reality, kindness with caution. Similarly, honesty, while noble, can be self-destructive in diplomacy. A prince who always tells the truth may be admired in the short term, but he risks being exploited by more calculating opponents. Machiavelli suggests that rulers must be willing to lie, mislead, or hide their intentions when necessary. This doesn't mean a ruler should be malicious, rather, they must be wise enough to know when honesty harms more than it helps. In this way, Machiavelli redefines moral strength, not as blind adherence to goodness, but as the capacity to adapt morality to context. The case for strategic cruelty and controlled fear. Among Machiavelli's most controversial arguments is his defense of cruelty, not as a vice, but as a political tool. He distinguishes between cruelty that is well used and cruelty that is excessive or erratic. The former, he argues, can bring order and stability. The latter leads to resentment and revolt. In Chapter 8, Machiavelli praises Cesare Borgia for eliminating chaos in Romagna through swift, decisive acts of violence, followed by a restoration of order. While morally uncomfortable, Borgia's actions achieved peace where chaos once reigned. This strategic use of cruelty highlights Machiavelli's core belief that outcomes matter more than intentions. The death of a few may prevent the suffering of many. If fear maintains order and prevents civil war or foreign invasion, it may be more ethical, in the long run, than ineffective kindness that leads to mass destruction. It's a harsh lesson, but one grounded in historical reality. Furthermore, Machiavelli emphasizes that fear is a more reliable motivator than love. People's affections are fickle, he writes, but their fear of punishment can be controlled. Still, he cautions rulers to avoid being hated. Cruelty must be used intelligently and sparingly. Too much, and it backfires. This delicate balance between fear and hatred, order and oppression, is one of Machiavelli's most profound lessons. Goodness, when too soft, can invite chaos. Cruelty, when well placed, can prevent it. The mask of virtue and the power of appearances. Machiavelli understood that appearances often matter more than reality in politics. People do not see a ruler's heart, they see their actions and public persona. Therefore, it is not necessary for a prince to be truly virtuous, but it is necessary to appear virtuous. Honesty, piety, mercy, and justice are all excellent tools for shaping public opinion, even if they are selectively practiced or entirely feigned. This approach may seem deceptive, even hypocritical. However, Machiavelli is not endorsing immorality for its own sake. Rather, he is pointing out a political truth. Leaders who project virtue gain public trust, which can be used to strengthen their rule. If a ruler can maintain stability and protect his people while hiding ruthless decisions behind a mask of goodness, the result may be better for all involved. Today, this lesson is still relevant. Politicians carefully craft their public images, often hiding harsh policies behind carefully chosen rhetoric. Leaders speak of freedom while limiting it in the name of security. They promise transparency while withholding critical information for national interest. Machiavelli would not condemn this, he would call it necessary. In a world where perception shapes power, the mask of virtue is not a lie, it's a tool for survival. Embracing realism without losing humanity. In confronting the dark side of goodness, Machiavelli offers not a celebration of evil but a warning that idealism, if not tempered by realism, is a dangerous path. He challenges leaders to think beyond personal virtue and consider the broader consequences of their actions. A good ruler is not one who always acts morally, but one who ensures stability, safety, and continuity for their people, even if that means making hard, morally ambiguous decisions. At the same time, Machiavelli is not entirely devoid of moral concern. He believes in the greater good of the state and in leadership that ultimately benefits the collective. His real revolution is in shifting the ethical lens from personal integrity to political responsibility. He asks us not to discard virtue, but to apply it wisely, and sometimes sparingly. In the end, the prince forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Can goodness survive in a world that rewards deceit? Is it more ethical to rule with justice or to rule effectively? These are not questions with easy answers, but they are essential for anyone in power. Machiavelli may not offer comfort, but he offers clarity, and in the murky world of politics, that may be the most honest gift of all.